Bono, the lead singer of rock band U2, had a back and forth with Joe Rogan over USAID that has caught Elon Musk's attention.
Let's watch.
It's not proven, but the surveillance enough suggests 300,000 people have already died from just this cut off, this hard cut of USAID.
For sure, there have been a lot of organizations that do tremendous good all throughout the world. Also, for sure, it was a money laundering operation. For sure, there was no oversight. For sure, billions of dollars are missing. In fact, trillions that are unaccounted for.
Musk responded to Bono's claim on X, writing, "He's such a liar/idiot. 0 people have died." Bono appeared to have referenced numbers from mathematician and infectious disease professor Brooke Nichols. Nichols created a model to estimate how many people could die from USAID cuts. That model calculated the loss of funding for diseases and food programs and the amount of people the aid was serving.
New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof wrote an article refuting Secretary of State Marco Rubio's claim that no children have died from USAID cuts. Kristof cited a young boy named Evan, who Kristof says was being kept alive with the help of a program started by President George W. Bush. Kristof continued, writing, quote, "Then along came President Trump and his freeze on most humanitarian aid in January. How could a 5-year-old orphan possibly obtain medicine on his own? Evan weakened and soon died of an opportunistic infection."
Okay, but there is a big difference between 1 and 300,000. The 300,000 is a projection by a model. Models can be wrong. And my broader point will be, and you're not going to like it and we're going to argue about it, but it is not the same thing to say that there is direct harm, like killing someone is different from simply not forcing other people to spend their money to give them food or medicine they need to stay alive. Charity is a good thing. We can all aspire to be more charitable. Government aid is not charity. It is confiscated from people who want that money. They might need it for their own pocketbooks. They might want it spent at home. They don't have a say over it. It is not charity when the government takes it from you and gives it to someone else. That is something Americans vote time and time again that they oppose, that they don't want to do, that they unfortunately have no control over. So it is not, look, there is always, it's a hard world. It's difficult. There is always some troubled corner of earth where there are starving people or dying people or people in war-torn situations that we wish we could make better and that we try to intervene to make better. And what happens? We intervene and we make it worse. This has taught us all to be a little bit more hands-off, especially in terms of the government intervention, but I support charitable efforts, and Bono is himself a very charitable person who's done a lot of good. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that he speaks quite frequently about how the major number one thing that lifts people out of poverty in the third world is actually not government intervention, but markets coming along, is having trade and engagement and having those kinds of policies. So I agree with him on all that. I don't agree that we are suddenly responsible for 300,000 deaths because we're willing to spend a little bit less on foreign aid.
Well, I think calling USAID charity oversimplifies it. So it promotes global stability, right? It promotes economic growth. It promotes national security. When you think about vacuums being created by this aid not being there, you have places like China and Russia who use that as an opportunistic time to then go in those nations and kind of take control. And so we don't want to see that happen as the U.S. being the superpower that it is. So, you know, real lives are at risk when we cut some of these programs. And so although that number is an estimation, I think what Bono hopefully was trying to say that, you know, millions of people access these basic needs globally. So this is an estimation for a certain amount of time, but overall, 95 million people will lose access to basic health care. USAID is the pillar of some of these systems. Over 3 million preventable deaths are estimated to happen if these people lose health care over time. You know, the things like basic water in the Congo that we were helping provide a tiny, tiny bit of stability in that part of the world.
Is the U.S. taxpayers responsible for providing water?
I mean, 23 million,
isn't that the Congo's
23 million
responsibility?
children will lose access to education. I mean, it's just more of a humanitarian aid and helping do our part to promote global stability. I mean, we don't want China to come and take over all those places, right? We don't want Russia to come in and take over all those places. That's not really what we want. So that's why we're providing USAID to kind of balance out what's happening in the world. And the U.S. has done that for generations. So I don't see why that would be the first thing on the DOGE chopping block. It seems a little bit cruel.
Well, I mean, it might seem a little bit cruel, and I am open to arguments that this was not phased out in the correct way. Frankly, my number one criticism is that because it was done without any congressional oversight, it will easily be reimposed when a different administration has a different policy. If you're going to undo spending that was appropriated by Congress, you actually have to do rescission. I've said this a gazillion times on the show. That's what they have to do. And, I know I've heard the stories about, food that was marked for USAID to go to people and is just kind of sitting in warehouses now and is spoiling. And, well, we don't want that. That's a tremendous waste. We shouldn't do that. I don't want to suddenly yank from people something they were expecting, but that's just the reality of government aid, is that you shouldn't, things that, we're not creating anything sustainable if they're totally reliant on our generosity, and again, it's not the government's generosity. The government isn't giving them any money. They're giving them our money. It's our generosity. That's not creating anything sustainable for them. I think there's a major difference between maybe building infrastructure for them, that like a bridge over a river, so that now this village and this village can engage in commerce and they can improve everybody's living standards. That's, to me, a little bit more tangible than just, here's another round of food for you, here's another round of food for you, here's another round for food of you. They have to learn how to do that for themselves. Also, there's a tremendous amount of corruption in the distribution of aid, and as we're finding out in Gaza.
That's the part
as we're finding out that the UN, when they were doing it, it's being pilfered by Hamas.
I am all for an audit and an internal review of programs that we're supporting. Remember, USAID was targeted because DOGE wanted to figure out how to bring the deficit down and thought they should do it on the back of the most vulnerable populations around the world. And now we know that that deficit may go up and even past where it was because of a budget bill that increases tax cuts for rich people. I think that we need to understand that there is an entire system set up, and USAID was helping that system to try to create stability in regions. And so we need to understand there was a way to go about this and protect people's lives in the process. We didn't have to yank the rug in the way that we did and just leave people out to dry. We could have audited the system, went through any corruption, went line by line, and actually saved real money to see which organizations maybe don't need to be supported, which people need to be rooted out of an organization. But instead, we did it the fast and quick way instead of the effective and long-term way. And so here we are with people not only suffering. I can't speak to how many people have actually died. That reporter actually brought up an example of one kid, but eventually we'll have worse health, which we know health concerns can lead to things like death.
Our government is, our country's trillions in debt. And so the idea of having a commission to form a committee to study the problem and look at ways we can cut back, I think strikes a lot of Americans as not sufficiently speedily motivated to address the problem of the fact that we spend way more money than we take in.
So the
and
speedy way was the way that
go.
Elon Musk did it, and now they're caught up in lawsuits, and nothing has been put in place permanently, and so it's just going to cost more money in the long run.
There's a tremendous permanent government apparatus that stands in the way of spending less money that we don't have. That is a very sad reality, and that's why Elon Musk concluded in his press conference last week with Donald Trump when he was asked by a reporter, do you think it is easier to build a colony on Mars or to cut government spending? He heartily agreed that building a colony on Mars is probably easier.
Well, let's see what happens with Tesla and Mars.
We have lots more to talk about today on Rising. Stay with us.